Running?
Let's
On
see.
running. So, good morning and good evening, folks. Welcome to Karate Without Belts. My name is John.
I'm Jeremy.
Welcome, folks. Hope you all had a good week. Jeremy, how have you been doing this week? All right.
I've just been a new level of craziness, but other than that, it's fine. So it's all good. So
We always want to try to achieve that every week.
yeah,
Mine's been new levels of figuring out how to balance insomnia.
I got you. Understand? Been there, done that. So
Always fun. Before we started the recording today, we were trying to compare levels of sleep for certain hours. So that might be a good subject later on to talk about is how much sleep do you need in order to actually do karate?
yeah,
But today we're going to get into talking about kata and the order it is taught and or practiced in, and things around that. So, I guess the one thing we can approach this topic with is curriculum.
yay. No,
Okay, fine. We talk about curriculum. Well, okay.
I said that, and I'm like, wow, that sounded about as flat as a dull cowbell or something. I was like, holy cow. No, I mean,
If there is one thing karate needs more of, it is cowbell.
yeah, exactly. Um, but
But
yeah, it's kind of like almost like the subject that everybody likes to go to and nobody really wants to talk about is curriculum. So a lot of
right,
times,
and the idea of kata order directly proceeds from this, right? Um,
yeah,
but at the same time, somewhat. I was talking to somebody who who is very strong knowledgeable about karate one time, and this person just looked at me. He's like, "Look, you can write whatever you want down on a piece of paper. It doesn't matter. What matters is what ends up getting practiced." And this is the person who was leading class and was literally looking at the walls, being like, "What's the next kata?" And has had like 30, 40 years of training.
yeah. No, I
So
got you.
I guess one way of getting into this in terms of pedagogy, how obviously it kind of depends on your style, right? Because we don't we are largely shurite practitioners.
No, yeah. I got you. I mean, I guess my thought on it is, what are you trying to accomplish, and what foundation are you trying to build?
Hmm.
And I mean, you look at different styles, and like the one we're probably most familiar with, we mainly start off with non-chikatas,
Right.
the sideways katas, the teki, what basically the same.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of styles start off with Hainan or Pinyan katas.
Or even
And
they start off with like what they consider basic katas. They're considered like I pattern katas, the Fukugara katas, or the Takioka katas,
yeah,
or
it yeah,
whatever
and
variation they're in.
I mean, I've seen some schools, try to develop, hand and foot type coordination, whether you're doing like saison stances, horse stances, cat stances, or a mix of all of them, just to try to get that flow going of hand and feet going together. And I can see that, and I can definitely appreciate that. And it may not even be something that's a traditional kata. It may be something. Hey, look, we found, maybe the instructor's like, look, I like to teach this way. I like how hands and feet work together, doing it, boom, 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 A, B, C, D, just to get somebody going, and just and that's cool. I mean, I never had a problem with that. I always thought that was okay. That's one way to really kind of introduce something a little different.
Right. And I think that's well, and then goes into the question of whether katas are necessarily meant for basics or katas are meant for style, if that makes sense. Like this kata represents the techniques that we're trying to pass on in the style, as opposed to just this is how you block, this is how you move, this is how you move your feet, this is how you kick, XYZ, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you're teaching, I mean, whatever you're teaching, this is just kind of something I've kind of, I guess, been handed down to from other instructors that I've worked with was what were you building? What are you trying to build as far as your foundation in a student? Is it historical lineage, or is it fundamental to actually helping that person understand what they're doing in a an offensive way, or as a practitioner, I, or the other way is what's the best way you can actually teach it so that everything kind of builds off each other. And so I think that's probably one of the latter topics we'll probably talk about more so than right up front. But I've always thought, what foundation am I building?
Right.
Am I building a solid foundation? And I think, I mean, if you look at how a lot of schools, a lot of systems do it, I mean, I think in some ways they follow. You can kind of see what kind of foundation they're wanting to build. I mean, if that makes sense.
Yeah, perfectly. And I think it any way someone tries to configure a kata curriculum, right? And
Mhm.
then even importing other things into that sort of curriculum, it's they would normally have a reason for it. I One of the first instructors I started with didn't have this problem and was very they practiced 5 very basic foundational katas and then moved on to Seiyuchin, which
Mhm.
is like a Goju kata, which
Yeah, yeah.
they were using for kind of just issue. I guess it was the Ishinryu version of that. Not 100% on that. It was like the I would say it was more of the bastardization of it, but regardless of that, at least having some sort of foundation was important. But I'm not necessarily sure if it's necessary between basics and kata training. Um, I don't think it's necessarily controversial to say that. Now,
No.
how?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm good. Go right ahead.
Um, well, I would say more. I wouldn't say necessarily, kind of the basics, but more I would say more taking your basics, putting in the kata, and then developing technique.
Right.
I mean, it just kind of just progress that a little bit further. I think some schools stick with basics, kata basics, and they're missing the big picture of it.
Right.
If that makes sense. If
And
you're not trying to really develop technique and really develop how you're working with it, you're losing a lot of what you're really trying to accomplish. Whether it's kick punch, whatever. If that's all you're really teaching and not how to use it, you're missing a lot in the transfer of knowledge. And at that point, what are you truly? I mean, the question you got to ask: what are you truly developing? What are you trying to build with your students, with yourself, with your school, with your organization? If that makes sense.
no, perfectly. And to kind of to illustrate your point, the basics that I had learned from those like kind of initial like quote unquote basic katas were really good. Those were good basics. If I didn't practice those kata, I don't think I would have had the basics that I did. Even though I think today we would disagree with them. Um, but then kind of those kata then say Yuchin do not were not like was not a necessarily good pairing together because one doesn't prepare you for the other and the other it goes off in an entirely different direction. is that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's missing exactly what you're talking about, integrating the kind of basic foundations into in kind of making a natural progression into what you're working on with kata.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
So, oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
no, go ahead.
I mean, yeah. So I mean, without that foundation, what are you leaving the student with at that point? And that's kind of my point. Is like one of the things I always took to heart was a conversation I had with my first instructor, Robbie, and he he basically said, my goal is whenever somebody walks in my school, they're better off when they walk out.
Mm, I think that's
Whether
what
it's,
most instructors want. That
well, I mean, it was just very succinct, to the point, direct, and had a very clear goal. Done.
right.
Yeah, and so I've always taken that. I've taken that to heart. Like, and I guess that's one of the things he ingrained in me. And so therefore, every time I teach, like whenever I teach somebody, I want to make them better one way or another, whether it's through a lesson in wisdom, maybe it's, maybe it is technique, maybe it's thinking about things a little bit differently, maybe it's teaching them how to analyze stuff. I want them to be better, and therefore I need to have some foundation to build off of. So that's just me.
And that might be where people get confused when they look at kata, that they that where they have a big difference between the two things is they don't understand that their basics are going to go into their kata, and they don't understand that the techniques they practice in kata come directly from their basics.
Right.
If they're
That's
not, then they need to re-examine what they're doing.
right. I mean, like I'll just go on about. You probably remember when I did this. When my mom passed away, what was it 6 or 7 years ago? Um, it 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 really bugged me because I wasn't mad at the world, but I don't know. I mean, for almost all my life, it was always mom and me. Dad, I grew up in a military family. And so basically, dad was off either being deployed or sent some exercise or something. And mom was there, it was mom and me. That was basically it,
Right.
um, most of the time. And when she passed away, it really left a hole, just left a space in my life to where it's like, what next? I'm like, in some ways, I really felt, what next? What about my martial arts training? I mean, I was to a point where I really didn't care too much to train a whole lot. And I took almost a year and went back and said, you know what? I need to just do one thing in martial arts and really learn from it. And so I took that year and just mainly did Nahante Shodan every day for almost a year.
Mm.
And really, I mean, not just did it, but studied it. Why am I doing things? Why am I doing this? What comes out? And I mean, I would do it and I wouldn't even think about it. It's not like, okay, I do this, do this. I was like, I just, just go, do how it would come out naturally, and then look back at it. It's like, why am I doing this? Where is this coming from? How is this getting in here? And it goes back to your point. I really learned how whenever it naturally comes out, you're going to have little nuances come out in that kata that okay, hey, these are coming from techniques. These are coming from basics. These are coming from just different things that you've seen, or even, okay, this part is very similar to this kata, and just maybe a little little twist in what naturally comes out. And,
Yeah.
I was very thankful that I did it, but I also now understand after doing that, I understand my foundation of how I do kata, how I teach it, why I teach it a certain way, things like that. If that makes sense. I didn't mean to go completely on a roundabout, but in a way, I thought it was kind of an important point here.
Right. So again, I guess the question would be then, so in the kind of I hate how English makes it say style or system or something like that because in
Yeah,
Japanese it's just ryuha. Like, but um, in our particular style, we have at least for our quote unquote basics 12. So if you started, that's the first kata you worked with. So I
yeah.
guess the question would be, would it matter, do you think, if you worked on something maybe in the middle of that or even at the end of that? If you worked on a different kata for the same amount of time, just a different one.
I think for what I was looking to accomplish, I think it would have been completely different. I don't think it would have accomplished what I wanted or what I was looking to accomplish.
Okay.
And that was to get fundamentally, foundationally sound. Where am I at? Why am I doing these things? What's going on? In a nutshell, it also spilled over into what I did in my professional career too. Why am I doing this? Why am I doing? So it was just a really interesting year of introspection and stuff. So
Yeah, and
uh,
I think that's where a lot of people ask, like, why do we do kata in karate? I mean, that's kind of the reason.
but I mean, for me, it was to look at that foundation. Now, if I was to look at a different kata, since since basically we start off with non-shodan,
Right.
so to
Teki
me
Shodan.
that was the foundational kata of the system. You know,
Right.
foundational of what I practice. Um, but if I would have picked another kata, I think I could have produced the same results if I would have done that first, if
Okay.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So in other words, I have that foundation, therefore now I can relate it to whatever I want, or
Right.
however I can see that foundation. If I wouldn't have done that, then I think I would have had some gaps in knowledge. I would have had some gaps in training. I would have had some gaps in a lot of whys and whatnots. I'm like, why am I doing this? I mean, it might have been answered eventually, but I don't think I would have had a clear understanding why, if that makes sense. I
No,
mean,
it does. I guess then I guess the question is then, are some do we think that some katas are more foundational than others? And therefore they need to be started earlier than later in that regard, not only in terms of teaching but also in practice and kind of getting to a point where it would be all right for us to, once we know this kata, we can do this kata, but we can't do this kata without that kata, right?
I do think there is some things to that. I've kind of broken it up. Just like I said, this is just my personal view on it.
Right.
I wouldn't say beginner, but you know, I would say you got like novice katas to work with. There are certain katas that, yeah, you should stick probably with beginners. You know, people are just starting. And then, as you gain in knowledge and understand movement, you understand a little bit more what you're doing, then start adding what I like to consider more intermediate kata. And that would be probably, I would say, some of the latter, kind of maybe the Nanchi Sandan, uh, last of the Pinion katas, Tamari Seizon. I would say those are more your intermediate because really you're looking a little bit more on your footwork, along with you're putting more into it.
In terms of movement and stuff like that. So
Yeah,
I guess in that understanding, minimal movement at the beginning and then more movement as you progress.
yeah, and I mean a lot of people from different systems think that your Nahanchi and Teki katas are basically intermediate to advanced, and in some ways I can kind of see that as well too.
Yep.
And then I would say probably your more advanced katas would be more like your Pasai Kusanku, in our system Nisei Shi. Uh,
Goju-Shiho,
yeah,
Shinto.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think there you do need to build up in those areas. How somebody structures it, it's up to them,
Right.
I, but I think building that foundation, if you've got those levels and have them clearly defined, or at least for the most part mostly defined, then I think I think that's definitely viable, because then you're building off one another, and therefore you're building knowledge off of everything else that you've learned.
Exactly. And I think that's a really important point, especially when you're trying to lead a group of people or even just one or two people to kind of where you are. You have to go look back. It's like, why did I learn it that way? Maybe
Mm-hmm.
you do need to change that up,
Right.
because how many people do we know start with Pinon Shodan?
Yeah, I mean there are a lot. I mean a lot of in what we consider peon shodan, others
Or,
consider our peon neon, and so there's a
oh Lord, that wonderful controversy.
well, we're not getting into that. Okay.
Oh no, we'll lose the Shotokan listeners. So
Well, hey, and I respect that, and I mean, uh, to be perfectly honest, yeah, I think peon shodan or peon neon and Heian shodan is, I mean, yeah, that's a very, very good basic kata. I mean, there's, I mean,
covers
it's
everything.
not, yeah, I mean, a little bit of everything, but it's not so advanced to where you're going to get lost very quickly. So it's not
Well,
bad. I
and
mean,
if we roll it back to why those were created in the first place, not the Naihachi katas,
right.
but if you roll it back to why Pinyon is Pinyon in the first place, some people want to like claim it was like some guy in a cave named Chatan created these two, which it probably has some truth to it. But Itozu created them for what? For who?
Um, this is what my understanding was, is the the Pinyon katas were developed for, and I mean I could be wrong. Don't hammer the comments or anything like that. I mean, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
Bring it! Bring them all! Bring them all!
I mean, my understanding was is that those were designed to teach military personnel very, very quickly how to strike quickly and fast, efficient, in the case of hand-to-hand combat. And if you look at the katas from that point of view, because I will be the first one to say, for the longest time, I did not appreciate those kata at all. I did not like them. I just didn't.
You didn't like the
Okay.
Pinyons.
I did not like the peon katas. I really didn't, until somebody explained it to me that way, and I looked at it from a different perspective. Now, it could be completely wrong, and I'm fine with it. But you know what? After I got that perspective, I had a lot more appreciation for those kata, and I actually did them a little bit differently after that explanation.
No, and I think
So,
that that's a good explanation. It is more or less accurate. The only little foil to it is it was meant for school kids, to learn them. At least from what I understand. Again, yo, bring it, comments. Come at us, internet. So, um, anyway, the it was meant for school children to build them up to be better service people in the army, so they actually have a grounded basics training already, where they just join the military and not have to worry about at least doing that kind of training again.
Yeah.
So
So,
there's a letter. I guess we're gonna have to do an Itozu episode now, but
all right, cool, sweet.
not right now. I don't
Oh
feel like
no,
doing that research on the fly. But
no,
there's a letter out there where Itozu basically was just like, these are the reasons why everyone needs to learn karate. It's basically your BuzzFeed 10 Reasons Why article today. But I mean, it's not wrong. Um, but I would agree with you that I think that there's a deep value to them. I don't know necessarily how they should fit in with the basic curriculum. I think it is not a dumb move to make them the first things people learn.
no, absolutely not.
But
I
the,
don't.
but this
Yeah,
begs this question, right? This is something I've always had a kind of a quandary on, because we've worked with lots of different people, and kind of lots of different people have different ideas on how they begin people with katas.
right, right.
And I've had an experience where like I've learned five kind of like the preschool like baby's first pinyan katas, like the stripped down version of the pinyan
Yeah.
katas,
Oh yeah.
called the Takayuka katas. But if they're just meant for basics, are they only meant to be practiced for basics, or are they meant to be practiced as things on their own? Right? Because, like, for example, Goju Shiho or Pasai or Kusanku, which a lot of the techniques from Kusanku end up in or are in the pinyans.
Right.
Are those meant to be those katas seem to be meant to almost be solo arts within themselves.
Well, I think the answer is yes on that. It can be either or, and
Right.
it goes back to it's interesting. I had a conversation. I teach also. I'm an adjunct professor also at a local university. I teach one class in computer science. And I was having a conversation this week that really relates to this with one of my students, and it boils down to, he goes, well, how am I going to apply this out in the real world? I told him, like, look, here's the deal about education. What you put into it is what you're going to get out of it. Is it all encompassing? Is it all knowing? No. But what you put in is what you're going to get out. And I think that way with all these kata. If you train your students to put in certain things and look at it from a certain perspective, and historical perspective is included in that because I think that's important. And I think it was very important because that's when I saw that difference, I changed the way I did it.
Right.
And I changed my intent, the
Right.
bottom line. And I see, I see college students like, I just want an A. Well, do you not want to learn anything, or do you want me just to put an A down on your grade card and just be happy? I mean, what do you want? What are you wanting to get out of it? That's the whole focus of it. And so if you look at kata, should it be just basics? Should it stand alone? Should it be a part of something more? Yes. I mean, it's kind of all because technically, I can train in a pinyan kata and just work on my basics,
Right.
or I can train in a pinyan kata and work on actual technique, or I can do it to supplement techniques off of another kata, and that'll be something else I'd like to talk about here before too long too. So
Right. No, that that goes into something a little more not a it's a little more above my pay grade, but definitely in your pay grade. But I mean, I can kind of pretend to be in the room for it. So,
my pay grade's about janitor right about now, so that's all good. So.
oh come on, if you're a janitor, I'm the guy who screws in the light bulb. But no, that's 100. I believe what you're saying is 100% correct. In that also makes me feel like, well, it's probably also the kid probably wants an A because he's got to take too many classes in, I don't know, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, 13 weeks, whatever. And so he's got to cram all that in and also impress mom and dad and or, make his loan money worth it. Makes me think that we should base college credits on how much work you actually put into the class.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be interesting?
Like the old days. But anyway, all right. I'm old, so that's okay.
I'm not that far behind.
Oh.
Oh, 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 oh.
Oh, okay. All right.
The podcast almost crashed. Oh no.
No.
Oh
Okay.
no. That means I need to get in the editing bay more this week. No. Okay. So I guess maybe we can flip the script here a little.
Okay.
So we're kind of talking about kata order. We've been, for those just joining us on this podcast, if you just decided to click in the middle of the video to start listening, talking about kata order and getting to where we want to go with it. Could we, instead of kind of going from a foundational level to a kind of a more advanced level and kind of seeing it that way, which many people do and many people use, and I think is just as effective and useful. Could we just take one kata and practice somebody on it for as long as they need before moving them on to something else? And I'm referring to something very specific from our kokoroe, our guiding principles, right?
Yeah. I think the sad truth of it is, I think today's society is not patient enough to do that.
Okay.
I'll be perfectly honest. I think it's a cultural thing. I can be wrong, but I mean, everybody, almost most people I've trained over last several years, newer people, it's like, okay, I got this down, okay, it's a checklist, okay, I got it down, let's go, let's move to the next. No, it's like a crock pot, it's not a microwave, okay, people. It's gonna take, and that quote from Dave Ramsey, I'm not trying to steal his deal either, but he always said, huh?
Dave Ramsey?
Dave Ramsey.
Was he that guy on Baywatch?
No, he's the guy who's the big financial coach, and he talks about building wealth. It's a microwave, it's a crock pot, not a microwave. So, and I mean things like that. And I'm not trying to steal his quote. I'm just giving him credit. I'm giving credit where credit's due. I'm not going to take that. But the bottom line is, I don't think our culture will. Today's culture is too fast, and everybody wants things now. And it's like, I mean, it was interesting. I had a conversation with one of the parents that my daughters, they dance together, so they're in dance, and so some kids they talked to the dance instructor, and they moved up like 2 or 3 classes, and I decided, you know what, let's just go in progression and let my daughter build her foundation. That was kind of my point. I'm like, let's have her build her foundation before she gets all burnt out and all this other stuff. And why is she not advancing? And and she was kind of a little bit upset because she wasn't with all of her friends. She's with some of her friends, but not all of them. And so, I'm trying to explain that to, an 8 and 9-year-old. It doesn't always go well, but I think in the long run, I think it's a better thing. And it's also trying to teach her a little bit of patience as well too. So, um, I mean, I don't think it just shows up in karate and martial arts. I think it shows up everywhere. So,
Well, and then so is there a way of reteaching that in culture then? Because I think I think it's I don't think we're so far away from it. I know when those words were written, they were probably dealing with that problem, and that's why they were writing them, right? Like they don't want people to move on and advance too quickly, especially if that was written at that time, right?
yeah, I mean, it probably there's probably some, but I think I think society and culture today is moving at such a pace that I, I, I mean, it would literally have to be a complete culture shift. I mean, you would have to really, really, I, to be perfectly honest, I mean, that's a topic that could take years to try to even come to an answer to, but
Yeah,
I, I don't, I don't see that changing. I mean, I
because
see
we
kids
weren't
that
raised like
kids,
that, right?
yeah,
We didn't even come up like that. I don't think anyone in the last 100 years has really come up like that.
no, and what's interesting is, you know, it's funny because I mean, I go back to my old basketball coach from high school. He'd always get us to calm down, and he always referred to a story, and I'll say it a lot cleaner. It was like, you know, you have two bees and they're hovering over a field of clover, and you know, the young bee taps the old bee on the wing and says, "Hey, let's zip down there and just get get some pollen and make some honey." You know, the old bee stops and's like, "Son, you got a lot to learn. You need to slow down. We're going to take our time. We're going to get all the pollen and we're going to make however much honey we want." And so, in the long run, I think that kind of lesson needs to be taught in culture today, and it's not. And I mean, I see that even in my industry. I mean, people are go, 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 go. It's like, stop, slow down, stop, slow down, stop, slow down. Oh, we gotta make this. Stop, slow down. So,
Yeah. No, we need unchecked, what's the word? We need unchecked, undivided growth, right?
yeah,
That's what a lot of people want,
yeah,
right? But that's not how anything like a plant doesn't just grow overnight. A plant takes
right,
time to grow.
right.
Trees just don't grow overnight. They take time to grow. Kids don't grow. I make this joke with the little kids I teach, where they want to high five me, and I just say, "Grow, grow." You ain't grown up. Well, too bad.
Yeah,
So you don't get a high five.
yeah,
So, but that's kind of the thing where it's just like, even though we have that kind of culture, the reality, it's the unspoken reality of that. Now you're gonna have to wait. You're gonna have to take your time more. And
right.
I think there might be a possible way. The what I'm referring to, gang, is an old kokoro, an old guiding principle. I don't think it was written by Itozu. Might have been, might not been. Keep on hearing different stories on it, but basically saying, a long time ago, people only learned one kata for 3 years, right? And this goes back to a lot of different things I've seen in from Japanese culture where 3 years become a master on something. You take 3 years to work on one thing and you become a master of it. Now, if your kata list is extensive,
Yeah,
well, here's to your long life. But
yeah, yeah, exactly.
but I think that goes right back into what you were saying, how what you were doing with the study in Nahachi. Even if it was just 1 year, you can then reapply it to other things.
Right.
And so, because you slowed down and looked at one thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Exactly.
I think we're
So,
talking about God order, but
well, Well, I mean, I think we're talking about kata order, but I think also we're talking about the importance of, with that order. I mean, it comes responsibility with
With great order comes great
study.
responsibility.
Well, yeah, I mean, but it also comes to where it's like you should pay attention to what you're studying as
Right.
opposed to worrying about what's next on the checklist.
Right.
And everybody's guilty of it. I'm guilty of it.
I'm guilty of it. Everyone's guilty of it.
Yeah, I mean, but I think it's stuff you have to work through too. So
Well, it's also finding the balance because we have more information than we've had ever, right?
yeah,
We have more katas than we can shake a stick at. And then
exactly.
we've got like stick katas now and all the other sorts of katas. I guess it kind of ends up going into talking about weapons, and if we can
Yeah,
maybe quickly talk about it or not, um, because it's not just karate, it's kobudo.
yeah.
So to me, they're the same thing. I know to you, they're the same thing.
Yeah.
But
I mean, it's definitely part of training, definitely.
so
So
then I guess kind of shift into the final, I don't know, phase of the final phase of this subject is in what order should we teach kobudo? When should it happen? How should it happen? Right? Can it be ordered? Could it be paired well with, from the ground up or not? Because you've had an interesting experience with this, and I've had a experience with it. But
yeah, I mean, I can also, I mean, because there's 11 weapons in our system.
with us, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, that's associated with us, and I I I'm at least proud to say that one of the things I wanted to accomplish is I wanted to at least learn one kata from each one of those weapons. Now, did I want to get great at each one of them? No, but I wanted to know about each one of those weapons.
right.
And um, so my perspective is I do think there's an order, but there's a flexibility to it.
Okay.
I
I
think,
think most of these weapons are shared. I think the only thing it's better to say it, the only thing we don't do is what is it, Timby, Rochin, and I want to say, oh yeah, the what is it, the sickle and chain,
oh yeah, the
Koresagama. But there's also like an Okinawan version of it where it's just all metal and it's a metal spike.
yeah,
So
yeah,
like super esoteric Okinawan weapons, like we're would love to talk to people who practice them and know what that's like. But kind of
right.
more, I think the most esoteric we get is Nuntibo Manjusai.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. But
Sorry, I didn't
I
mean to stop your flow there.
no, that's all good. But I mean, um, I think I think there is, like I said, I think there's a grouping and there is some flexibility in it. And with that, I think you look at more, I'd say, beginner level weaponry and kind of, I guess, a lot of things that I carry on today are things that I learned from my first instructor, Robbie, which was basically first weapons you should learn should be one weapon, two hands. So you're not trying to do too much at one time. So Bo, Joe, Nunchaku, those were the three ones, and not necessarily in that order, but those were the first three that I learned. Um,
Okay.
and since he was his weapon of choice was Nunchaku, so guess what? I learned Nunchaku first. Is it my favorite? No. Do I enjoy it? Yes. I definitely still enjoy working with them, but it's not exactly my favorite. So I'm fine with that. But which, I mean, that made a lot of sense because you're trying not to control just yourself, but also a weapon, which made sense.
Right.
And so, and then he moved into more your intermediate weapons, which would have been Tonbo, Sai, um, Tonfa. I'm,
Kama.
I'm, I'm looking at my weapons rack now. I'm just making sure I don't miss something here. Yeah, I'd say probably those three, Tonfa, Tonbo, Sai. Those would be the next three, which would be more your intermediate, and then probably your advanced intermediate, or yeah, I'd say probably advanced intermediate. I would say probably cheesy kumbo or and Kama, because now you're adding a bladed weapon, definitely. And you could probably throw AQ in that mix, and then I'd say probably your specifically advanced weapons would be probably your Nute bow and your Manji Sai.
Right.
I'll say those two were the hardest. Those were the two hardest weapons I learned, and I mean I'm glad I finally did, um, but yeah, those were really hard.
So do you think that pairing should go along with? We hate to even go on this here, but like it's like into the Q into Dan rank, or even if we don't talk about that, just in training, do Bo or Joe or Nunchaku from your example, doing Bo, Joe, or Nunchaku when you first start training with open handed, then kind of slowly progress the same way, kind of in a dual system, or kind of they're paired together as it were.
Well, I've always kind of looked at it, try to match it up, try
Right.
to match up your weapons with your empty hand. I mean, how I can teach one and the other, but I did like how Robbie had it at the very first was you really couldn't work with weapons until you were at least an orange, at least had about 9 months to a year of training,
Hmm.
and got used to what you were doing, and not try to rush your training and start working with weapons right off the bat. So
Right.
I think that made I think that made a huge difference as well too. So
Yeah, I mean that's also like it's interesting that he calls nunchaku one weapon with two hands, right? I always
yeah,
feel it was like it's basically a tonfo, well not tonfo, tombo with a rope attached to it,
yeah. I
but
mean,
it is one weapon.
it technically is one weapon. I mean, technically. Now you work with it a little bit differently, obviously,
Yeah,
but I mean, yeah. I mean, to me, that always made sense, kind of grouping them up into that order. Did I learn them quite in that order? Pretty close.
right.
I did learn Nunte Bo before I learned Aku. I did that. I did, which meant, and maybe I'd had a different appreciation or a different perspective on with AQ if I would have learned that first as opposed to Nunte Bo, because things came very very quickly with AQ for me, but there's some similarities to them. So it's like, okay, that movement's this, and you just kind of roll with it. So,
Hmm.
but I
Yeah,
mean that was just my experience. So, but
mine was essentially whatever weapon I actually had. I'm going to learn the kata for
yeah, no,
until I was basically forced to start buying new weapons.
no, I understand that. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, that was pretty much the progression I took with it. And I mean, there's definitely different thoughts and stuff like that, and that's cool. But I, I I do agree. One weapon, two hands, you can control a lot easier than start. I don't know how I would have done trying to learn Psy right off the bat. I think I would have. I probably would have impaled myself a couple times more than normal. But
Right. So I do agree with that. That I think I'm going to be a traditionalist here and say bow is probably your best bet, but I think bow and tombow are probably your best bet to start with because that way they're kind of the easiest weapons to get a hold of. They're
well,
also
Bo and Joe.
yeah, and but I also think what is it tombow you can kind of because I've
Yeah,
got the Philip because I got a little Filipino arnis in me.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Oh,
I've
I got
I feel like that you can use that to do a lot of different stuff off of
you. Yeah,
that necessarily just people who have just a straight up yours is much different than others than I've seen, but people who have a very and this goes into a different topic, but people who just have a very straight. I did a kata for bow. Oh look, I'm doing a kata for sai. Oh look, I'm doing a kata for nunchaku. Right? They don't
right,
really understand how those weapons kind of function and work in real time as opposed to just working with them.
right.
So not necessarily in kata wise, but
No,
cool,
no, no. No, I agree 100%. Yes. So,
cool. Well, anything else you want to say on in terms of order?
well, as far as weaponry or just in
In
general,
in general, weapons.
I I think one of the things it's interesting. One of the things that I took, I'll go back to some of the things that Robbie taught me. And one of the things that he showed, and I talked to him a handful of years ago, maybe 4 years, 3, 4 years ago, and I asked him how he created this. And what he did is he created a way to put, like we have 12 basic kata. We put He created a way to put all 12 of them together so that you could see everything together,
Hmm.
done in one way. And so in that aspect, one of the things, and he basically said, look, I did that as kind of a training exercise to kind of change it up instead of, you do first kata, second kata, third kata, fourth kata, instead of just change that up to where it's like, now you're mixing it all up.
Right.
And
You've gone
I
from
don't know,
order to chaos.
right. But I think one of the things that it's always helped me was I can see how a Nahanchi kata relates to Pasai, that relates to a Pinyan kata, that relates to Nisei Shi, and how you can kind of take this little bit over here, this little bit over here, and this little bit over there, and make a whole technique out of it.
Right.
Now, I, after talking with him, I don't think that was, it might have been his intent, but I don't think he totally meant to do that. But that's one of the things that's helped me along the way. So, and through my training. So,
No, and that I think if you can, I think that's the mark of somebody who's able to kind of move it on, as
yeah,
it were, right? Not just deciding order. This is how I'm going to teach the thing I was taught.
yeah,
That's good, but then when you can take it and kind of remake it in a way that's fresh and kind of adds new life to it than what was done before, and then that kind of passes on to your students.
yeah,
I think that's more than valuable, and
oh,
also
yeah,
expresses to them it's like you can do that too.
yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I mean, I think that really, that changes up just, but you have to have whatever base you're going to have. And
Right,
then,
exactly.
so, I mean, and that's a combination of basic, advanced, intermediate, different, different katas that way. So
Cool, cool beans, cool beans. The only thing I might have to end with that is that order is important, but you don't necessarily need to stick to the order you were taught. But if you're teaching, and even with different people who you teach, you don't need to stick to necessarily the same order, because each person you're going to teach is different, and that's going to be different depending upon if you teach a big school or you teach privately or whatnot. But
right.
you can experiment, try out different orders, see what works best. Do what Jeremy did. Spend 1 year doing something. So
Yeah, you'll definitely learn a lot. I mean, not just about the kata, you'll learn about yourself. So kind of interesting. So
cool. Jeremy, what are you up to this week for training?
um, it's interesting. Last couple of days, I've actually been working a little bit with Joe, and I really hadn't worked with it in quite a while. So it's kind of like just giving me a fresh perspective. So it's kind of kind of interesting. So I'll probably work with it a little bit more than probably move into either AKU or I'll go back to working with Sai again. So somehow I'm gonna tie something from Joe because I've always found whenever it's like, okay, I'm looking at something, I want to work with it and just kind of get a feel. And it's like, all right, what am I going to learn from it and move on to a different something else. So
Cool.
but
Yeah, I'm actually going to retake up that pairing you were talking about because you taught me that a while back too, and I was digging through my notes the other day. I'm like, hey, there it is. So I'm gonna try to spark that up again this week.
I got you.
So actually, I was doing all that set faster, doing it in that order than doing it in the prescribed order on the curriculum.
Yeah,
So it is a good way to get your foundations in 1 day. It's like your steps. You get your steps in 1 day, get your foundation order in 1 day.
yeah,
That's just a
absolutely.
lie invented by Apple, but that's all right.
Yeah, whatever.
Bring it, ghost of Steve Jobs. So,
uh, yeah, that's a whole other discussion. So
well, y'all, thank you for listening. Oh, we'll do that later. But thank you all for listening. Please remember to donate to the Shuri Castle Fund. Again, any little bit helps. And keep on training, folks.